The H1B visa. It's the lifeline for thousands of skilled Indian workers chasing the great American dream. For years, it's been the gateway for students and IT professionals to build their careers in the United States. But now, with a dramatic move to hike visa fees, the dream is under threat. This isn't just about some numbers on a paper. It's about lakhs of Indian IT workers, tens of thousands of students in American universities, and especially thousands of young Indian, highly educated women who dream of entering the H1B program but may now find that dream slipping out of reach. Today, we'll explore how a new, exorbitantly high visa fee could crush the hopes of so many Indians who see the US as their land of opportunity. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Data Point. First, let's break down what's actually changing before we get into how it affects Indians. The US has announced a $100,000 surcharge on all new H1B visa applications. Until now, the cost was only a few $1,000s, so this is a massive jump. The new rule applies only to initial employment. In other words, people applying for a US job through the H1B program for the very first time. It does not apply to those already on an H1B or those simply extending their stay. And to be clear, this is a one-time fee, not a yearly charge as some early reports suggested. But even as a one-time cost, it's still an extraordinary leap from what applicants were paying before. Let's start with the Indian IT workers back home waiting for that much awaited on-site posting. The chance to earn in dollars, save some money and secure their future. For many working in giants like Infosys or TCS, this is a goal built over years of sharpening their skills. But with the new $100,000 H1B fee, the dream of a US assignment for fresh recruits may simply collapse. And the reason is quite straightforward. We can understand this by looking at three numbers. Number one, over 60% of Indian H1B beneficiaries earn less than $100,000 a year. In contrast, only 40% of non-Indian H1B workers fall below this mark. Number two, the median salary of an Indian H1B worker is only $95,000 a year. That's among the lowest across all nationalities, only slightly higher than Nepali and Pakistani H1B workers. By comparison, the median pay for non-Indian H1B workers is $120,000. Now, remember, these two numbers include both new recruits and those who are already continuing on the program. New entrants always earn much less, which brings us to the third figure, number three. The average salary for a new H1B worker is $114,000, while an experienced worker on a continuation petition earns an average of $142,000. So let's put this together. If a company hires a new H1B worker at around $114,000 a year, but has to pay an additional $100,000 as visa fee, that pushes the cost to $214,000. Compare that with $142,000 it costs to keep an experienced worker, or even the cost of hiring an American worker, and you see why companies will think twice. Now, the third figure I mentioned, $114,000, is the average for all nationalities. But remember, Indians earn the least among all H1B workers. That means a new Indian H1B recruit is likely making far less than the overall average, probably closer to $70,000 or $80,000 a year. So the costs go up even higher. Indians are valued in the US job market because they bring strong skills while being relatively affordable to hire. But once you add this $100,000 surcharge, that cost advantage vanishes overnight. Now let's move to the next group of Indians, and perhaps the most vulnerable of them all: young, highly educated women trying to get their H1B visas for the very first time. To understand why this new fee hits them harder, we need to look at the history of Indian immigration under the H1B program. And again, let's use three numbers. Number 1. In 2024, women made up only 26% of those approved for continued H1B employment. In other words, nearly 3 out of 4 long-term H1B workers are men. But among those applying for fresh visas, the share of women was higher at about 37%. This shows that historically H1Bs have been dominated by men, but in recent years, more women have begun entering the system. The problem? The new 100,000 surcharge applies only to new entrants, exactly where women are trying to catch up. Number 2. Women generally earn less than men under the H1B program. On average, a new female H1B recruit earns $108,000 compared to $117,000 for men. That's $9,000 gap may not sound huge, but when companies are calculating costs, it matters. If employers are already hesitant to pay an extra $100,000 for a new recruit, they'll be even more cautious when the worker is on a lower salary. Number 3. This gender imbalance is not universal. It's specific to India. In countries like China, the share of women and men is roughly the same for both new and continuing H1B approvals. But in India, the skew is stark. Men dominate long-term H1Bs, while women are only beginning to increase their share among fresh applicants. So what does this all mean? It means Indian women were finally beginning to close the gap as seen in their higher share of new H1B petitions. But now, because the steep new fee applies only to fresh applicants, those gains could vanish. And because Indian women typically earn less than Indian men, their cost advantage to employers is even smaller once the surcharge is applied. This combination, fewer numbers, lower salaries, and higher fees, makes Indian women the most exposed group under the new H1B rules. There is another detail that makes the situation for Indian women even more striking. Among those who apply for a new H1B visas, Indian women are generally younger than Indian men. And not only that, a higher share of Indian women come with master's degree compared to their male counterparts. Now let's move to the next group. Indian students in the US. Imagine this. You land in America during the peak of pandemic to start your master's degree. You graduate in 2022 after spending tens of thousands of dollars on tuition and living costs. You take up an optional practical training or OPT job. That's the work authorization students get for 1 to 3 years while still on a student visa. And just when you are about to line up for an H1B, you are told your first employer will need to pay an extra $100,000 for you. For many, that means 5 years of studying and working in the US, only to be hit by this bombshell right now when they are hoping to settle into a career. Let's understand why this hits Indian students the hardest. Again, with 3 numbers. Number 1. There are about 3.3 lakh Indian students currently pursuing degrees in the US, making them the largest group of international students, overtaking China just last year. Chinese enrollments have fallen to around 2.7 lakh. So when visa costs rise, Indian students are the biggest group affected. Number 2. Around 75% of Indian students are enrolled in STEM courses: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. By contrast, only about 50% of Chinese students are in STEM. And STEM degrees are exactly the ones most sought after by the US employers and most likely lead to H1B visas. Not only do Indians outnumber Chinese students overall, they also dominate in STEM. And since STEM graduates are the ones who line up for H1Bs, Indians face the brunt of this policy. Number 3. Roughly 35% to 45% of all new H1B approvals each year go to former international students on F1 visas. This shows how critical the student route is for entering the US job market. Studying in the US has been a clear pathway to securing a first H1B job. With this new surcharge, that pipeline suddenly looks blocked. So let's rewind. Indians now form the biggest pool of students in the US. They make up a far higher share of STEM students compared to the Chinese, and nearly 40% of new H1B visas typically go to people who were students just a year or two earlier. Put together, it means this visa fee hike doesn't just hit a few individuals, it slams into the entire student community in America. And that brings us to the end of this video. We have seen how the new H1B visa fee could hit Indians in 3 different ways. IT professionals in India hoping for the first on-site posting, young Indian women trying to break into the H1B program, and students in the US who now form the largest group of international enrollments. Each of these groups faces the same problem in a different form. A $100,000 hurdle that risks shutting the door on their American dreams. As this policy unfolds and the US government begins to put into practice, we'll see more and more stories of lives changed, careers derailed, and choices reconsidered. And we'll keep bringing those stories to you. Thank you for watching this video. For more such videos, subscribe to The Hindu.